Hello, everyone out there. This is Mr. V coming at you live from my living room, ready to work on iReady Lesson 16, Analyzing Point of View. I'd like to welcome you all. Going to be trying out some new things today. Got my phone here to do a little bit of pump up before we get this lesson started. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening. Watching around the world have been waiting for. Live from the sold-out Air Canada Center in Toronto, Canada.
It's time! I'm pretty jacked right now. I'm ready for this. You guys ready for this? We're going to get a good lesson going today. So again, today we're going to be covering the first 4 parts of the iReady Lesson 16 for Grade 7, Analyzing Point of View. Got a ton of things I'd like to share with you guys today. Pretty excited about this lesson. Again, every day I think I'm getting a little bit better at this process. I hope that you guys are, again, safe. Having fun with your families, keeping up with your reading and your learning. Again, education is key, even during these very turbulent times. So going to get started, going to start presenting my screen in a moment. So going to check out of here for a moment. I know that you guys can still see me if you're watching the recording. So learned that yesterday. Going to project the screen now. And here we go. It is time for the main event of the evening. So to start our lesson, I'm going to go to the Google Classroom, which has all of, again, our lessons posted in the stream. Looks like this lesson is actually still posted. Okay, there we go. So again, if you're on the Google stream and you've been visiting this and keeping up with the work and all that, if you see Virtual Learning Week number 1, you can see our first 3 lessons have been posted. Again, the only lesson that does not have a recording is lesson 1. Forgot to hit record, guys. Again, still new at the process, but I made sure I hit it today. Same thing with yesterday. So I'll show you yesterday's post to show you what a finalized post will look like for each day. So if I click on View Material, you can see all of the additional files. So you have the live stream here. You have the PDF document of the lesson materials, the student edition here. You have access to the student notes using this link. And then the sample work, which I'll complete with you guys during the lesson, will be available after the lesson is complete by clicking on this link. Additionally, after the videos are done, you can click on this link here in order to get live, not live access, but a live recording, I should say, of each lesson. So I'm going to go to today's lesson. I'm going to back out of here for a moment. Go back to our main page. Okay, we're going to go to Virtual Learning Session 3 today. I'm going to click on View Material. And again, maybe this is something that some of your friends or fellow students might need some assistance with how to access these materials. You could always show them this the first 5 minutes of any of my daily videos, and you could, obviously, I think this guides them right through the process. So again, this is the link to our meeting. Here's the link to our student notes, which I'll be starting with momentarily. And then this is access to the PDF document. As you can see, I've already got these windows opened up on top. Had some issues yesterday with lag, so opened up these windows that were needed for the lesson a little bit early, just to make sure everything was ready to go and that the stream runs smoothly. I know yesterday the first few minutes were a bit perhaps noisy, because we could not hear what was happening. Because there was some choppiness in the recording, and I have somebody joining the line now. Not sure who this is, but if you could please put your microphones on mute while I am going through the lesson, I would greatly appreciate it. It will help to keep us from any background noise that is not necessary. To start with the student notes. Okay, so this student note here, this link We'll open up to this window, and we're going to start with the student notes, which reviews the first part of the lesson. So here we go. We're going to get started. And again, you could always visit the link to the actual student version by clicking on the link at the top of the student notes. That will open up to the PDF version of the lesson. So today's student learning target is in regards to reading literature, grade 7, standard 6. Our goal today says that I can analyze how an author develops and contrasts the point of view of different characters or narrators in a text. So some key vocabulary we'll be covering during this lesson are point of view, perspective, contrast, narrator, first person limited, and third person omniscient. So to begin our lesson, we're just going to talk very loosely about what perspective is, and I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into perspective and how it relates to point of view. So I'm going to start with perspective. So it says, what is perspective? Perspective refers to the point of view that a person has about a particular experience. In plain terms, perspective refers to someone's attitude or how they feel about a particular experience or event. It's important to keep in mind that characters and people can have different perspectives rather that contrast each other, which means that they could have different perspectives or different attitudes about a particular experience. Oh, that was a good idea to zoom in. You can probably see the notes a lot better now. So for example, going back to how characters and people can have perspectives that contrast each other, a story about a party, for instance, that Charlie and Rose go to can be totally different based on the character's perspective and point of view. So for instance, Charlie might have a great time because he is an extrovert or someone who is outgoing and knows how to interact with people. Meanwhile, Rose might have a terrible time because she's an introvert or someone who is shy and doesn't feel very comfortable in social situations. So again, our perspectives can be different. We can go to the same event, see the same things. We could all go to Disney World, and some of us might have a lot of fun, and others might find Disney World a bit childish or beneath them, or just not fun. But I would have to disagree. I think Disneyland and Disney World are probably the two best places on earth. I'd rather even be there right now, despite the fact that they're closed. Might just bring a little bit more joy to the household. So let's continue on with our notes. We're going to talk about perspective and point of view. Common question that I think all teachers receive is our perspective and point of view different? Well, generally speaking, point of view and perspective mean the exact same thing. Oftentimes, tests and assignments will use the terms interchangeably, meaning that sometimes it might use point of view, other times it might use perspective. However, sometimes our point of view is used to refer to the type of narration that is used by an author, and that's what the next couple of sections of our notes are going to go over, are the different types of point of view. There's two main types. So continuing with this next section of notes, sometimes a story gives you the point of view of only the narrator or the voice who's telling the story. This is called first-person narration. So in first-person narration, you'll see the author use a lot of pronouns like I, me, my, our, us, we, in order to, explain the events and experiences within the story. Meanwhile, some other times you'll get the point of view of one or more characters. This is called third-person narration. In third-person narration, the narrator is not typically a character in the story, and they're telling the story of other people. So in third-person narration, you would not see pronouns such as I, we, my, or us being used. You would see more he, she, they, her, his, instead of those, again, first-person pronouns. So continuing on with the different types of third-person narration, and again, this is some technical language that as seventh graders you might not need to know this, but eventually these are concepts that you'll have to know. So why not learn them now when you have the chance? You guys got all this free time sitting at home for the next at least another month based on the projections from our governor yesterday. But again, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through it together, and we're going to continue to learn. So types of third-person narration, we have third-person limited, which is where narration occurs when the narrator only reveals the thoughts and feelings of one character. So in third-person limited narration, the narrator is telling someone else's story, and they only know one character in that story's thoughts, feelings, or motives. Meanwhile, with third-person omniscient narration, This occurs when the narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of multiple characters. So again, in third-person narration, they're telling someone else's story. Again, a story that is not their own. But in third-person omniscient narration, the narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of multiple characters. So that means they know more than one character's thoughts and feelings, all right, as opposed to third-person limited, where the narrator only knows the thoughts and feelings of one character. So why is point of view and perspective important when reading literature? I'm just going to scroll down a bit here to make sure I have all of the notes up, which I think, yeah, that's actually the end point. So that makes sense. So why is point of view and perspective important when reading literature? Well, authors use point of view to give you insight into the characters' attitudes about the events and people around them. Characters in the same scene or situation can have totally different experiences or have different ways to describe an experience. And we'll read some sample text today that actually convey that exact same message. And then lastly, using point of view allows the author to advance the plot and help us better understand a character's actions or motivations. So again, using the perspective, which again, all stories, all narratives have a particular point of view or perspective that the author uses. And the author uses them in order to advance the plot. So, move us into the conflict, to that rising action, to eventually a resolution to the conflict. And then they also use it to help us better understand a character's actions or motivations. So when they say motivations, they mean why a character is acting or behaving in a particular way. So that is a conclusion of our notes. I'm going to move over now to our PDF, the student version of this lesson. I'm just going to quickly review the first part. Again, we went over all of the notes already. So if you again have any questions about any of this material as I'm recording, feel free to put it in the chat, or you could obviously always email me if you're watching the recording, and I can go back and take a look and see what I could do to help you out. So I'm going to get right up to the first page of our lesson, which is right here. The one thing I forgot to point out with these lessons is you notice that to preview each lesson with the student notes, I go over the learning target. The learning target you can always see here in the top right corner of your screen. The learning target is related to the standard, which the lesson pertains to, which Common Core State Standard, which is what the CCSS above that highlighted text on your screen means. So our lesson again today is analyzing point of view. The theme of all of the text in today's lessons, because all iReady lessons seem to follow a particular theme. So the theme of this lesson and the text involved is perspectives, which again aligns perfectly with our lesson. So I'm just going to go over the first part of the lesson. And again, a lot of this will probably sound like review, but it's going to start right at the top. So it says, roller coasters aren't for everyone. You might love the thrills, but your friend keeps her eyes closed the whole time. Each of you has your own perspective or point of view about the experience. I know for one myself, when it comes to getting on roller coasters, I don't tend to open my eyes until after that first drop, as the anticipation going up the roller coaster is a bit nerve-wracking for me. Whereas, for instance, my cousin Michael, who I used to ride roller coasters with all the time when we were kids, he would be screaming at me the whole time to open up my eyes and quit being such a wuss or a pansy. But hey, heights were never really my thing. I've always been kind of a grounded individual. So continuing on, stories contain different points of view too. Sometimes you'll get the point of view of the narrator or the voice telling the story. At other times, you'll get the point of view of one or more characters. Again, we had talked about this type of narration, this first person and third person. By revealing their words, thoughts, feelings, and actions, the author gives you insight into the characters' attitudes about the events and people around them. So we're going to take a look at this little cartoon here, and it says, who are the main characters in the scene below? How would the description of the same event differ if it were told from each character's point of view? So here we have what looks like I forget what he called these guys, a high wire act or a trapeze artist who is doing some sort of balancing act on a tightrope. And it says, okay, this next trick is going to be tough. Meanwhile, you see the people in the audience saying that he makes it look so easy. So again, if we had this story being told from a first person perspective, maybe that of the trapeze artist, he'd be explaining how difficult the whole process was. Whereas if we had the same story being told about this particular moment from the audience's perspective, they might look at this and think, wow, this is so simple, this is easy. And hopefully they wouldn't try to go home and balance on their fence or something like that and hurt themselves. Because it obviously is a lot harder than it looks. So obviously their perspective is a bit different. So going to go down a little bit. We're going to go over this little chart here that was previously completed. There's the word I was looking for, acrobat. So the character of the acrobat, again, which is the guy on the tightrope, the evidence says he says the next trick will be tough, and he's walking on a high tightrope, as you can see. Obviously, it doesn't look that high based on our perspective or point of view where we're viewing the scene from. Therefore, his point of view is that this routine is obviously very dangerous and he could fall at any minute. Meanwhile, the perspective of the audience member, you can see that they're smiling, their eyes are wide. They're saying that the acrobat makes it look easy. Their point of view seems to be that the acrobat seems very talented and that there's absolutely no danger that he could possibly experience. So just to wrap up part one, the characters in the scene are having two different experiences and would tell different versions of the same story. In other words, how an event is described is directly affected by who is describing it. So by carefully choosing or describing points of view, the author is able to advance the plot and help readers understand the characters' actions and motivations. I'm actually going to take this final quote here, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to add that to our notes right at the bottom, because I think that's such an excellent quote that really captures the essence of our entire lesson. So the good thing about this is if you have the notes up on your screen right now, you can actually see me typing. So I'm going to pop that in. Bam. So now we have this final quote that really, again, captures the essence of our lesson. Oh, I italicized the entire section instead of just that word. There we go. Boom. And now what I'm going to do is going to close these gaps a little bit. Bam. Now we got all these notes on one nice page that you could easily print out after. So again, thank you for allowing me to do that. Just again, as I come across things in the lesson itself, I could add. I'm just gonna pop them in. So we're gonna be moving into part two of our lesson, which deals with our modeled instruction. Again, a lot of this work I previously completed before the lesson was filmed, so I'll be showing you guys my sample work as I go along. So this particular story is about a boy named Ramon and a girl named Blanca. Okay, I'm probably going to mispronounce her name a few times. When I think of Blanca, I always think of the Street Fighter character that is green and lights himself up in flames and electricity. But anywho, her name is Blanca, so it's about a boy named Ramon and Blanca and their siblings, and it's about a trip to an art museum. So they'd be going to an art museum, and the title of this little short story is "Places of Disinterest" by Rowanna Jackson. Okay, the genre is realistic fiction, so that means that this is a story that could potentially really take place in our real lives. Something to take away from the title. I'm going to go to my sample work now, because as you know, there's a lot that we could tell based on the title of a text. And with each text that we analyze during these lessons, I'll be making an inference based on what the title says. That is also tied directly into the little blurb that is provided. So again, the title is Places of Disinterest by Rowanna Jackson. The title of the story, Places of Disinterest, leads me to infer that Ramon and Blanca are not interested in this trip to an art museum. Now, I do discover that my inference was incorrect later. It seems like one character actually seems to find the art museum very exciting, while the other character is not very much excited at all about their experience at the art museum. So we're going to go to the story now. I'm going to read it aloud. And while I'm reading, keep this essential question in mind. How does the author contrast the points of view of the different characters? Now, I'm going to switch back to the lesson. And you see this chart on this first page. We'll be actually completing that chart together. You might have just seen it during my sample work. And we'll be answering this question here for part 2 as well, which you did not see in my sample work. But here's the story, and I got it nice and beautifully situated in one nice clean shot on the screen. Again, getting better with some of these tools, finding out that I do need to zoom in after watching the recording yesterday. It'll make things a lot easier I think, for you guys to follow along. So, Places of Disinterest by Rowena Jackson. Another Inez family Saturday afternoon outing was drawing to a close, and for Blanca and Ramon's parents, the car ride home from the art museum couldn't be over fast enough. Blanca stared stonily out the car window, while Ramon beamed. "That is the absolute last time you get to pick where we go," Blanca exclaimed and scowled at her older brother. The entire exhibit was filled with paintings that looked like someone ran around splashing buckets of paint randomly all over the canvas. "That's called expressionism," Ramon eagerly explained. "Each painting is meant to evoke a feeling. What were some of the emotions you experienced in the exhibit?" "I felt quite frustrated and exhausted," Blanca sighed dramatically, and then she exclaimed, "and I didn't appreciate that security guard being so rude to me. You sat in a priceless metal sculpture. He was just doing his job." All right, so the story does continue during part 3. So if the cliffhanger ending here has got you wanting more and some closure, do know that lesson 3 gets to the conclusion of Places of Disinterest. But for now, we're going to come back to this question. I'm going to focus on this question. How does the author contrast the points of view of the different characters? And you'll see that I have this same graphic organizer here in the sample work. So I'm going to actually click back to the sample work and review the chart with you. So this is based on, again, my observations. So the question again, how does the author contrast the points of view of the different characters? And this is actually a great organizer that you guys could use in order to respond to questions of this nature. It's always a good idea to kind of organize your thinking before you start writing, even though sometimes the answer might be a bit obvious. It's always good to get your ideas down and then start, connecting the dots and putting them all together. So it's going to start with Blanca. Okay, so here's the evidence that was provided for Blanca. It says stares stonily out window, doesn't want Ramon to pick an activity again, disliked the paintings, sat on a sculpture. So based on this evidence, okay, I was able to infer that Blanca's point of view or perspective in their experience, so their attitude or feelings about their experience at the art museum, says that she did not enjoy her time at the museum and felt that the art was boring, which is likely due to her being younger than Ramon. It does mention back in the text. It's going to go back to the text. It does mention that Blanca is younger, all right here. It says Blanca exclaimed and scowled at her older brother. So that could be a possible reason why she finds the art boring or just quite doesn't understand it, because her intellect level isn't necessarily there yet. So we're going to go back to the student work, and we're going to cover Ramon now. So for Ramon, it gave us the point of view. Okay, this bolded text here is what was in your document. So it tells us what his attitude is, and now it wants evidence that supports that point of view, or evidence that shows that he enjoyed his time at the museum because he understands and appreciates fine art. So here's the evidence that I found. And again, these aren't direct quotes. I chose to paraphrase the evidence. You can always paraphrase, guys. I tell you all the time. Sometimes it's a bit easier, and it comes off as a bit more professional. So here's the evidence for Ramon. Ramon beamed on the car ride home. Okay, beamed, this word here, is a word that the author is using to create an image in our minds. If somebody is beaming, that means that they're smiling. Okay, and I just smiled at the camera like the Joker, like a crazy person. But if somebody's beaming, it's more like an overwhelming sense of joy. Okay, and again, he's on his car ride home. And maybe it's a little bit confusing because you're like, well, if he liked the museum so much, why is he so happy on the car ride home? And I would say that perhaps he's probably just excited to go home and share his experience with his friends, or maybe even his teacher. Here's some other evidence that shows that Ramon enjoyed his time. He's able to classify the art into its category. He recalls that some of the art is called expressionism, which again, if he was not interested, he probably wouldn't have paid attention to that word or concept of art. Lastly, further evidence that shows he enjoyed his time at the museum and he understands fine art is that he's eager to explain the art to Blanca, meaning that he's eager to kind of come back at her when she starts kind of trash talking the art and speaking disrespectfully about it. Okay. So hopefully that helped you as far as kind of getting your ideas down. Again, we have the evidence here, which was previously provided. And based on that evidence, we needed to make an inference as far as Blanca's attitude or point of view about her experience at the art museum. Meanwhile, Ramon, they provided us with his attitude or point of view, and we needed to find the evidence. Okay. And as you know, with MCAS and ANET testing, and even on iReady, sometimes you have questions that are really just looking for the right evidence. For instance, in Ramon's case, or they give you the evidence and they want you to make that inference or conclusion. All right, going to carry on now to the last part of part 2, which deals with the short answer question at the bottom, just using it home. If you don't have access again to the student work, maybe you don't have a computer. I felt after watching yesterday's video again that I could probably kind of jump back and forth to better show you guys where all this work is getting completed. So Blanca and Ramon have contrasting perspectives about their experience at the museum. There's that word contrasting again, okay? Contrasting is just a fancy word for different. So if I were to restate this, it would be Blanca and Ramon have different perspectives about their experiences at the museum. And I think that that's quite obvious. I think obviously after reading the text, you guys probably knew like right away, like, okay, well, Blanca don't like it. She's too busy on her phone and being bored, while Ramon is beaming with excitement. So the question reads, how do the characters' interests and feelings affect their points of view? So I'm going to guide you to the sample answer to the question now. So the sample answer that I came up with says that Ramon is interested in art and understands what the artists are trying to achieve. As a result, he enjoys his time at the museum. Meanwhile, Blanca finds the museum boring because she's not interested in art or artists. Again, Ramon showed sincere interest in the art, so obviously he had a better experience, a more pleasurable experience at the museum, where Blanca didn't find it fun, thought it was boring, and her whole experience was kind of ruined too because she sat on the piece of art instead of observing it like a normal person, and then was kind of questioning why the security guard attacked her. Well, if I was a security guard in that museum, Blanca, I might have to restrain you as well, because a lot of the art that exists in museums is priceless. Okay, you can't go around just sitting on it and ruining it. Some of those pieces could be hundreds or even thousands of years old. So next time you go to the museum, Blanca, my advice to you is don't sit on the art and you might have a better time. You're supposed to look with your eyes and not with your bum. Okay, so after that little comedic gesture, we're going to get to part 3. Okay, so part 3 of the lesson is a continuation of Places of Disinterest by Rowena Jackson. So I'm going to go back to the PDF to keep guiding you guys along. So part 3, the guided instruction, again, it instructs us to continue reading about the visit to the art museum and use the close reading and the hint to help you answer the question. Okay, so the close reading prompt is something I'm going to model how to complete for you. So if I go to my sample work, all right, you see that I have the close reading prompt outlined here. So I'm just going to read it off of this screen, but it says, how does Blanca's and Ramon's points of view differ about the still life paintings? Underline the words and phrases that show the contrast. So obviously, folks, I cannot underline. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to type, all right, words and phrases into this little box here that show how Ramon and Blanca's points of view about the paintings differ. So we have a couple of paragraphs to read here. And it says, after a few moments, Ramon tried again. Those still life pieces were so remarkable. Did you notice how the artist captured the interplay of light and shadow across even such ordinary objects? Blanca checked her text messages for the billionth time and muttered angrily, sure, I always pay attention to boring stuff like light and shadow when I'm looking at a bowl of fruit. Well, was there anything at the museum that you enjoyed? Blanca thought carefully for a moment before flashing her wrist. I did enjoy the gift shop because I got this cool watch. All right, so clearly, obviously Blanca is totally disinterested, would rather spend time at the gift shop as opposed to the museum itself. So again, to go back to our sample work, I'm going to complete the close reading activity. So it asked me to underline words and phrases that show the difference between Blanca and Ramon's points of view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in Blanca's name here. I'm going to type in Ramon's name down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the text now, and I'm going to actually jot down some of the words that show their points of view about the still life paintings. Okay, so I'm going to start with Ramon. So again, just going to reread after a few moments. Ramon tried again. Those still life pieces were so remarkable. Okay, so he says that those still life pieces are remarkable. So give me a second here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a split window. Okay, so I'm going to drag this one out. Okay. This way I can do like a side-by-side comparison, or I can juxtapose, to use some high academic vocabulary. I can juxtapose the material and make my life a lot easier here, instead of jumping back and forth between windows, and make everything a bit more easier for you folks at home as well. So for Ramon, okay, he had said that those still life pieces were so remarkable. Okay, so remarkable, I know, and again, going back to our lesson from Tuesday, if you were able to take part in that, we went over connotative and denotative meanings. So the word remarkable is a really positive word. Okay, the connotation of that word, or the feeling that it emits, is that, like, you know, it's very spectacular, it's extraordinary, it is very unique and one of a kind, and very valuable. So continuing on, he notices how the artist captured the interplay of light and shadow across such ordinary objects. And again, that information is not important, because we're looking at words that show their points of view about the life paintings, and nothing there really tells me anything. So I'm going to jump over to Blanca, because this whole paragraph's about her, and it says that Blanca checked her text messages for the billionth time and muttered angrily, "Sure, I always pay attention to boring stuff like light and shadow when I'm looking at a bowl of fruit." Well, let's keep in mind that she's looking at her phone, first of all. Okay, so she checked her text messages. All right, this is while Ramon was talking to her. In addition to that, she refers to it as being boring stuff and being just simply a bowl of fruit. Now, to contrast that, again, Ramon doesn't see it as just a bowl of fruit. He sees the bowl of fruit as being art, okay, and being remarkable. So clearly, that's some evidence that we might be able to come back to and use later. So going to move down now, going to open this up to a full screen. And I'm going to go down to the hint in the multiple choice question that we need to respond to. So the hint says, how does Ramon react to Blanca's complaints? I think that was the first time I messed up Blanca's name. Forgive me. Blanca, Bianca, it's very much similar. It's a female, right? So how does Ramon react to Blanca's complaints? So if we go back to the text, okay, he asked if there was anything at the museum that she did enjoy. Okay, so he does not seem to give up when she complains about the stuff being boring. Oops, I went to the wrong window. So again, he keeps being like, he kind of keeps pestering her, or getting her to say something positive about their trip to the art museum. You know, so I'd very much kind of describe his actions as being relentless. Okay. He keeps trying to convince her that there was at least something enjoyable about the trip to the art museum. Oh, and as I was just typing all that, I think nothing came up, unless my computer is just running slow. I'm going to sit here for a second. Stop. I'm going to slow down. I've been running very much quickly through the lesson, and that's not because I want to rush through it at all. It's just because I don't want to make these videos too long or too cumbersome for some of you guys at home. Again, if you're tuning in and you're watching this live, or you're just watching the recording, I just appreciate that you're putting in some effort. Okay, and look at that, magically on my screen, we have everything that I just typed out. So let me just review that question real quick. So the question was, how does Ramon respond to Blanca's complaints? And I said that he responds I used the word, I just typed the word relentless again, just getting my thought down. Um, and I continued and said he keeps trying to convince her that there was at least something enjoyable about the trip to the art museum. And again, I'm answering this particular question in a complete sentence, but really these are just annotations. The hints and close reading activities and the margins for all of these lessons are just there to help you. Okay, whether or not you listen and use the close reading activities or annotate in the same fashion that I am is entirely up to you. I'm just showing you guys kind of how I would approach this work if I had to do it and I was in your shoes. I think this is the best way that I can support you during this time. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a second and we're going to review this question here, which associates with part 3 of our lesson. Okay, so part 3 wants us to answer this question. It says, based on evidence from the story, which statement best describes Ramon's point of view about his sister? So which statement would describe his point of view or his attitude about his sister during this time? So I'm going to start with the first one. Okay, it says he thinks Blanca could be a painter if she paid attention to details. Well, that impression is not given anywhere. Okay, at no point does it mention Blanca even becoming a painter. So I think that this answer is obviously one of the first answers if you were using process of elimination that you could probably get rid of. Okay, going down to B, it says he believes she should admit to knowing that the art is valuable. Well, I don't think that B could be an accurate answer because she's not going to admit that anything in the art is valuable because she doesn't quite understand that it's valuable in the first place. Let's not forget the fact that she sat down on the artwork as opposed to observing it rather like a normal person. Next, C, he hopes to convince her that she can appreciate fine art. Now, this idea really seems to align with what I had jotted down in my annotations, that he was very much relentless based on her complaints. Like he keeps trying to convince her that there's something about the trip that's enjoyable. So I think C closely aligns with my thinking, and I'm going to tell you right now. Actually, I'll let you know that the answer is C, and I'll explain that a little bit more later. Lastly, D, he's not sure that Blanca will ever